Good morning. Here we are at Temple Baptist Church again. We are still in the book of Genesis. We have covered a lot of territory in here, but now the book of Genesis has changed here in this lesson. We're going to go from talking about uh, Jacob and all that, and the page is flipped here. We're going to actually the rest of the book is going to be pretty much talking about Joseph and Jacob, and I want to read the first. It sounds like I'm talking in a barrel here this morning, but I wanted to thank everybody for all the prayers. This is the first lesson that I've taped in a long time now because of surgeries and things like that, and so anyway, we're back into the groove again, we think, and so I want to start out. We're in chapter 37 of the book of Genesis. And this talks about Joseph as a young man. I think about at the time of this, the time setting, he's about 17 years old. We'll kind of verify that here in just a little bit. But in chapter 37, verse 1, it talks about, and Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan. And these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Now, Bilhah and Zilpah, they were the handmaidens of Leah and Rachel. And actually, Joseph was the mother of Rachel. And so he was the line that was going to be perpetuated through Israel. Later on, there would be another son named Benjamin that would be born to Rachel. These would be the two kids, and she would die in childbirth. But back to the story here that we have, because this. Verse 3 sets a very, very, very bad precedent for any family. Today, it's as applicable today as it was all these many years ago from back to this time. But it says, now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age, and he'd made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that his father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. They couldn't, they had nothing good to say to him or about him, and that was primarily brought on because of his father's preference or favoritism towards Joseph. And going back in the past lessons, we see how Laban had tricked Joseph or Jacob into marrying Leah, and he had to work for him for 7 years, and then when that was done, there was another 7 years for Rachel's hand, and then and he was the one actually that Jacob loved, that Israel loved was Rachel, and he did all the other for her, and so now this is her firstborn, Joseph, and he's the favorite. I mean, he just there was no pretense about it. This thing here where it talks about there that he made him a coat of many colors there, that coat was it depends on in the Hebrew how that's translated, but it could be like a long sleeve coat or a coat that went all the way down to his sandals, or it could have been a coat of many colors as the scripture says here, or a combination of both. But at any rate, it was something that made Joseph stand out from the others. and it was a thorn in the side of the other brethren, brothers and sisters, and in my own family, I had one sister, and she was the oldest, and then I had then me, and then I had another brother, Gary, that was kind of crippled, and then there was physical issues and mental issues there with him, and then my other brother that came along in later years was the baby of the family, and so there I was stuck in the middle. So it kind of seemed like I got the work to do and all that, and I'm not griping about it. There was nothing at all like this kind of favoritism that went on here, but it's just it was a bad deal. And so anyway, let's look at the scriptures. That brings us up to verse 5, and we see Joseph evidently had a lot of time on his hands because these other brothers were out tending sheep and doing what they did in everyday life, and Joseph was at home. You know, he's 17 years old. He was how do I want to put it? He was a mama's boy and daddy's boy too, and so he got to stay home while the others did all the work, which kind of piled a little more aggravation onto a bad situation already, and they could not. It says there in verse 4, they just hated him. I mean, this thing was allowed to fester and to build up to it was a hate type situation, not just a dislike or an aggravation at him. And so they couldn't speak. They couldn't even speak to their own brother in a decent way. And so in verse 5, and then Joseph comes on here, and it says, and Joseph dreamed a dream. You know, sometimes you just don't have to tell everybody everything that you're thinking, but yet, you know, this can cause more hurt than it does good. And so in this case, Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And so now he says, well, I'm gonna tell you about this dream, and I don't know if he was aware of how much more of a gouge this was to these brothers for him to say that, or even to his own father. But he said, and he said unto them, hear, I pray you, this this dream that I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood, and upright your sheaves stood round about, and made I can't pronounce it. Since they bowed to him, and you know, these guys are looking at Reuben. Reuben was the oldest son. He was the first son born to Leah. He should have had in the end of things, he should have had a double portion of the inheritance when that finally came. But yet here we see Joseph interpreting this dream that all you guys are going to be bowing to me. And this, you know, he's already in the doghouse with them. And then he goes on with this. And it says there, and his brethren said to him, and in a sarcastic way, and I could kind of understand it. It says, and his brethren said unto him, shalt thou reign over us, or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. And, you know, I get this, I get it. I get their attitude, maybe their mindset, that here's this guy that's really the bottom of the list. And at this time, he was the youngest son, but yet the favorite son. But yet here at the same time, he's saying that I've had this dream, and all you guys are going to be serving me at some point in time. And they don't. Well, one, they don't believe it, and number two, they're not going that way. This is in their mind. This is not going to happen. And so this goes on down it, and it jumps down then to verse 18, jumps 10 verses. And but it says, and I'm going to kind of go through that pretty quick. And he said, yet he dreamed another dream and told his brethren and said, behold, I've dreamed another dream. And behold, or look, the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars made obeiance to me, or they bowed to me. And so he didn't just put the brothers in it. He said, Dad, Mom, and all of you guys are going to be under my hand someday. That's what he said. And he told it to his father and to his brother. And then again, there he goes. You know, you don't always have to tell everything you know or make a point of it when it's already in a bad scenario, a bad situation. You don't have to be a pain in the rear end with everything you know. And it says, and he told it to his father and to his brethren. And his father rebuked him and said unto him, what is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and my mother, shall I and your mother and your brethren indeed come to bow down themselves to thee upon the earth? And his brother envied him, but his father observed the saying. And here then he said, and his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. Isn't it? I see that verse there, and I thought, isn't it interesting? You know, and you kind of have to have the background behind all this that we don't have the time to go into. But isn't it interesting that whenever times get mad, that then the brethren, they want to go to Shechem, but they got to, which is a picture of the world at that time, and it was the people that lived there at Shechem were pagans, but these brothers, they had to they were tending the flock. They were shepherds, and it seems that in this series of scripture here, that it was a hard time of the year, like it might even have been in drought or something to that point. But he said there in verse 13, and Israel said unto Joseph, do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said unto him, here am I. And he said to him, go, I pray thee, and see whether it be well with thy brethren, and bring me word again. So he sent them out of the vale of Hebron, or there around Bethel, where he was at, and he came to Shechem. This is Joseph now, and he's out on this trip. He's looking for his brothers. So they have already left Shechem. They've gone up to this place called Dothan, which is right at would have been the south and east end of the plain of Sharon, and it was a very rich, fertile time, and so they had taken their sheep up there to feed and water them. And Joseph found this guy, and he asked him where his brothers was, and they said, they've departed. And I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren, and he found them in Dothan. And then the lesson scripture picks up again there, and it says, and when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. It's not the first time that this ever came up. It's not the first time that they ever thought about getting rid of Joseph, because the scripture says there they conspired or they planned to kill him. The only thing they had to do was figure out how they were going to do it. That was their issue at this point in time. And so they said one to another, behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore. You see how that little subtle thing in the scripture shows that the interpretation of the dream that Joseph had, the two dreams that he had, how that it kind of stuck in their craw, and they were not at all with any kind of peace with that. And it says there, come now, therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit, and we will say some evil beast has devoured him. We shall see what, and then sarcastically they kind of add with that, and we'll see how his dream works out then. So in that we can see that they had a plan. They developed this plan of what they were going to do, and they didn't. It was a deal where it seemed that they didn't have the courage to do what they had with all their big talk to actually kill Joseph. But I thought, as I was reading this and I was studying it, I looked at this and I thought, what would be better, to kill somebody outright or to put them out in a pit in a desert place where nobody was going to come by without any food or water? And so I don't see a lot of mercy in these brothers at all. And it says, and Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, don't kill him. Reuben was the firstborn, mentioned that a while ago. He was the one that should have got a double portion of any inheritance that was left, and but he did something really, really bad. He had went in and slept with Rachel's handmaid, Milcah, I believe was her name. Bilhah was her name. And he had slept with her, and then later on, Israel found out about that. And so what happened there, I believe that was in, I believe it was in verse 22 of the previous chapter where it said that. 35, chapter 35 actually, where it tells that story in that. But that was an awful thing to do that he did in that time. But Reuben, the mindset here is that maybe he's trying to get back into better graces with his father, Israel, because he's really grievously sinned there. But yet at the same time, for whatever the background story is, he's the one that stepped forward and said, no, let's don't shed his blood. Let's just put him in this dry pit out here and not hurt him. And it says it came to pass when Joseph was come to his brethren that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. And that don't mean that they just took his jacket off. They ripped it off of him. And this coat was the sign of favoritism from the father. But it was not everybody wore something like that back in those days, and it was something to bring comfort and security to him. And so they took this away from him, and they took him and cast him into this pit or this cistern. The pit was empty because there was no water in it, and they sat down to eat bread. How insulting could you be? Here come Joseph to bring them something to eat, to kind of look out for them. He's walked probably at least 65 miles hunting for his brethren. So actually, if you stretch that out or you look at it, it could have been as much as 100 miles by the time he had to twist around and do. But anyway, they took the food that he had brought to them to eat, and they put him in a pit without any food or water, and turned around then and ate the food right beside of him. And I can't imagine that Joseph was down in there just being quiet. He was probably hollering, "Hey, let me out of here! Help me with this thing!" And it says they sat down to eat, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead, with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, and going to carry it down to Egypt. These spice and balm and myrrh was things that was used in the embalming process, and the Egyptians were, big into that kind of thing. But anyway, these Ishmaelites, their their father of them was Ishmael. Then there was there is another phrase in there called Midianites, and these were sons of Abraham, but they were half brothers. A lot of them, their descendants, they were at least cousins, in that thing between the Ishmaelites. But they were what they were desert travelers. They were did not have very good reputation, and they were people that traveled up and down through the Middle East there, gathering up their wares and taking them to Egypt to sell them, and that's where this story goes with them. And so Judah said unto his brethren, Judah, again, one of the sons of Israel, and at the time Jacob, he come up with the idea. He said, okay, what profit will it be if we just kill him and conceal his blood? Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. And all this story, and we're going to run out of time, this seems like an awful, awful thing, but God is using these bad people to accomplish His will. Joseph is the one that's going to have a lot of ups and downs in his life, but in the end, he will end up on the mountaintop, so to speak. But then it says, then passed by the Midianites merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph unto Egypt. Now, I wondered about that. Most of the time when we study in the Bible, we see where 30 pieces of silver is the price of a slave. That's what Jesus was betrayed for. But when you look back at this, we have to remember, first of all, this is pre-law. This is pre-Moses and all that. And if a slave was to be bought, if they were between the years of 5 and 20 years old, they were that was the price of the normal price for them. And I suppose that was probably because whoever they ended up with was going to have to train them and raise them up and all that stuff. And so that's where what seems like a contradiction is really a lack of understanding sometimes in the Bible. It says, Reuben somewhere, it doesn't say where he was, but he was gone. And it says there in verse 29, and Reuben returned unto the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes, he tore his clothes, and he returned unto his brethren, the child is not, and where shall I go? And anyway, that's when they took Joseph's coat, they killed a young goat, and they killed it, they dipped that in the coat in the blood, and they sent it back to his father and told him that Joseph had been killed by an animal, and this is our proof of that. Now, all this is going to come back and haunt these guys years later, and it's a sad story, except that we cannot lose fact of the thing that God's in charge, God's sovereign, God's in control, and He is the one that is going to bring about a good and a peaceful end when this is all said and done. And so we need to not lose sight of that when bad things that seem bad to us happen, that God is still in charge. God's the one that will bring good to His people out of all that when it's all said and done. So anyway, I'm going to have to quit for now, and thank you for letting me come back. And some of the other guys will pick up, and they will be doing a better job than I've done, I hope. So anyway, thanks again for coming. Come and see us at Temple Baptist Church. Services at 8, Sunday school's at 9. We have services at 10 then, and then Sunday night and Wednesday night we have services. And so we'd be glad to have you at any time. So have a blessed week.